Blessings this morning to the people of God. Today we continue our summer worship journey through the Gospel of Luke. I love to reread and revisit the stories of Jesus, reminding myself of the lessons he offered to us through the examples of offering care, compassion, and forgiveness to all people. Through these stories, we are reminded of our call to also offer care, compassion, and forgiveness to all people, especially to those whom society often pushes aside, the least, the lost, and the lonely. Today, our focus is on the unconditional love of God. Thankfully for you and for me and for all people, we receive this unconditional love from God, no matter who we are or what we have done or not done. God knows us deeply, cares for us deeply, and loves us deeply, even in our own imperfections. God sees in us and sees the inside, sees what's on the inside, and calls for us to live into who we were each created to be, to live into our very best selves. Please pray with me. Loving God, in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of unrest in our world, let us remember that you are a part of it all, that you are with us trying to save this world. And let us remember that our church is built on the foundation of love and hope and healing. Let us strive to truly be the church that you have called us to be. Help us to break down barriers that divide people and build up bridges of compassion so that all may know and feel your love. Surround us with your care and compassion, and let us remember that you are the God of all people, seeking health and happiness and healing for all people. Help us to also remember to extend that love and grace that we receive from you. Amen. Psalm 5 is a psalm of lament, a psalm that is a pleading with God, a pleading for relief from the torment of others, a plea for rest from that which weighs them down. The psalmist is thinking and seeking God's justice for those who are doing wrong. As we all are quite aware, there is evil throughout our world, both close to home and far away. When we see it, when we experience it, the psalmist reminds us to bring it back to God, to seek God's guidance, to put our faith in God's commitment to justice. As none of us are perfect, and all of us fall short from time to time, it's important to remember that God's justice is not one of eternal punishment. If it was, where would that leave each one of us? No, God's justice is one that is led by grace, led by forgiveness, and led by love. Let us not forget that Jesus himself, time and time again, reminded us that we are not to curse our enemies, but to offer them love and to offer them blessing. So when we bring our hurts and the hurts of those around us to God, we also turn it over to God and put our faith in God's justice. Beyond this lament that we read in the psalm, we are reminded of the value that comes from simply going to God each and every day, each and every morning, seeking the guidance of God. Whether this is to seek relief from the burdens of yesterday's decisions or disappointments, or to celebrate the joys that were felt in yesterday's goodnesses and blessings, or to attempt to erase the troubling dreams and fears of the night, or to offer gratitude for restful, peaceful sleep. Whatever it is, whatever it may look like, the psalmist reminds us that we can always go to God, both in times of lament and in times of gratitude. The psalmist also acknowledges the need for God to guide our paths, to lead us through what the world can be full of distractions. We all are in need of guidance for our path, especially when the distractions of the world are so easily accessible on all of our electronic devices, screaming at us every part of the day. The psalmist begins this plea for justice for those who have wronged them, and they later point out of their own personal need for justice, their own personal need for guidance, their own need to be made right, their own need for forgiveness. May we also be reminded that justice and forgiveness are available to all of us, and that we are called to seek it out for ourselves as well. Much like in our psalm, our gospel reading for today reminds us of the importance of humbly going before God, of seeking forgiveness and guidance, and beyond even the importance of extending deep appreciation and gratitude to God. Our reading from Luke opens with Jesus accepting an invitation to have dinner at the home of Simon, a Pharisee. We don't know really why he was invited to this dinner, but nonetheless, Jesus accepted the invitation and showed up. And as they're getting settled in for what would likely be an evening of storytelling, an evening of eating, an evening of laughter, an evening of just connecting, an uninvited guest enters the house. A woman from the city. A woman Simon knew to be a sinner. Simon is shocked by her presence in his home. Yet there she is, entering his home where she immediately humbles herself at the feet of Jesus. She is so overcome with emotion, so overcome with gratitude, that her tears fall upon his feet. She wipes them with her hair and then anoints his feet with oils. Her admiration for and humility towards Jesus paved the way for a new connection to be made between them. A connection that is deeply rooted in grace and in forgiveness. But Simon doesn't see it this way. He is annoyed by the whole situation. He even mutters under his breath or says it in his head. But either way, Jesus senses and knows what he is thinking. So in true Jesus style, Jesus offers a parable to help him understand the situation a little bit better. The story Jesus tells is about two men who both owed a lender some money. One a great deal, and the other not so much. However, neither of them had the means to pay the lender back. So the lender forgave both of them. At the end of the story, Jesus asked Simon which would be more grateful. Hey, David, somebody can go talk to him. At the end of the story, Jesus asked Simon which would be more grateful. And Simon, as if on cue, said, the one with the greater debt. Jesus agreed and then linked it to the sins of this woman and the gratitude that she felt. For she had much sin. We do not know what her sins are, but I think we all could agree that we all probably have much sin. Yet she offered much love and much gratitude for the forgiveness that she received from Jesus. Through the telling of this story, Jesus reminded all who were gathered in Simon's house that day, and all of us still today, that we all have a debt to pay, and that we all are in need of a little grace from time to time. None of us are perfect. At times we may ignore the ways in which we need grace, and we may even forget the ways that we've received it in the past. But thankfully, God's grace has been and always will be available to us whenever we need it. Jesus reminds us that there is freedom in understanding and accepting the unearned, unending, unconditional love and grace of God. Yet Simon was so blinded by the sins of this woman that he didn't see his own shortcomings. He was so consumed by what her sins were that he couldn't see her for who she was, a beloved child of God. Like the Pharisee in this story, there are many people today that are more concerned with who is in and who is out, who is worthy of God's love and who is not. The woman had faith in Jesus, enough that she risked ridicule, risked shame by entering this home. Her faith gave her strength. Her faith made her whole. As I see what's happening in the world today, I am heartbroken by so much of the us versus them mentality. Rather than celebrating the uniqueness of our neighbors, society often points out our differences as a means of separating people rather than uniting them. I'm also heartbroken for the many who are suffering internally with whether or not they themselves measure up, whether or not they themselves are worthy, many of whom are fearful of what society will think of them if they speak up. However, I also see hope in our world. There are many who are standing up for those who are being pushed aside, seeking out ways to connect those in need with life-saving resources. In fact, as I look around this sanctuary, I am humbled and inspired by the many here who are living examples of reaching out and caring for those who often are forgotten by society through feeding people, delivering meals, visiting in hospitals, making connections, and simply being present for and with one another. Jesus reminds us both in his interactions with Simon and with this woman, as well as through the telling of this parable, that no matter what we or others have done in the past, there is forgiveness and grace for us all. God does not ask us to be anything other than who we were created to be. Jesus calls for us to humbly come before him and to offer our whole selves, the good, the bad, the parts we're proud of, and the parts that we regret. And by doing so, we are able to fully receive the love and grace of God. And in turn, we're able to extend it to others. And that is the good news. Amen. Now, before we transition to communion, I want to share with you a song that I recently found. A song to prepare our minds and our hearts to remember that love and grace is extended to each of us every day. It's a song called Me by someone by the name of Mallory Hope. And when she was asked about how this song came to be, she shared, "Me is a special reminder, even for myself, that I don't have to change who I am or conform to the world to fit in. I am loved and I'm enough just the way I am. It's easy to forget the beauty God created us for. I want this song to remind people of that beauty and to feel encouraged that it's okay to be me." So I invite you to listen prayerfully to the words and center your hearts for communion.